Officer Daniel Mercer had seen a lot in his 10 years on the force. Drug busts, domestic disputes, gruesome crime scenes. But nothing had ever sent an icy chill down his spine, quite like the sight he encountered that night. It was well past midnight when the call came in. A routine neighborhood patrol, a quiet suburb where nothing ever happened. As he drove slowly down the dimly lit street, his headlights barely cutting through the thick fog, his radio remained eerily silent. That's when he saw her. A little girl, no older than 7, stood at the second-floor window of a house at the end of the cul-de-sac. Her tiny hands pressed desperately against the glass, her mouth forming silent screams. The porch light flickered erratically, casting eerie shadows against the walls. Something about the way she moved, frantic, terrified, made his gut tighten. Daniel pulled over immediately, his training kicking in. He reached for his radio. "This is Officer Mercer, requesting backup at..." He glanced at the house number, but as soon as he looked back up, the girl was gone. A sense of unease slithered up his spine. Had he imagined it? Was it a trick of the light? No. He knew what he saw. Without waiting for backup, Daniel stepped out of his squad car, his boots crunching against the gravel driveway. The house was in complete darkness, save for the erratic flickering of the porch light. The wind howled through the trees, rustling the dead leaves that littered the yard. He pressed his hand against his holstered firearm, just in case. He knocked firmly on the front door. Silence. He knocked again, harder this time. "Police! Is anyone home?" No answer. A sinking feeling coiled in his stomach as he reached for the doorknob. To his surprise, it turned easily. The door creaked open, revealing a yawning abyss of darkness beyond. Daniel hesitated only a second before stepping inside. The air was thick with the scent of something rotten, something decaying. His flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing dust-covered furniture and a living room frozen in time. Old, faded wallpaper peeling from the walls, a television set from decades past, a single rocking chair positioned near the cold fireplace. It was as if the house had been abandoned for years. But then, who was the little girl he had just seen? A soft sound echoed through the silence. A whimper. Daniel's heart pounded as he followed the noise, his flashlight trembling slightly in his grip. The sound led him to the staircase, where dusty frames of faded family photos lined the wall. His gaze landed on one in particular, an old picture of a family of 3. A man, a woman, and a little girl. The girl looked just like the one he had seen in the window. Another whimper, this time closer. Daniel took the stairs 2 at a time, his pulse hammering in his ears. At the top of the landing, a long hallway stretched before him, doors lining both sides. The air was colder here, almost suffocating. The whimper came again from the last door at the end of the hall. With slow, measured steps, he approached, every nerve in his body on high alert. He reached for the doorknob and twisted. The door swung open with a loud groan. Inside was a small bedroom, dimly illuminated by the streetlight filtering through the window. A bed sat in the corner, sheets rumpled, stuffed animals scattered across the floor. And there, standing in the middle of the room, was the little girl. She was trembling, her long dark hair hanging in tangled strands around her face. Her eyes were wide, filled with something that sent an immediate jolt of dread through Daniel. "Hey there," he said gently, lowering himself to her level. "Are you okay? I'm a police officer. I'm here to help." She didn't speak. Instead, she lifted a small, shaking finger and pointed behind him. Daniel felt the hair on his neck rise. Slowly, he turned his head. The closet door was slightly ajar. A guttural sound, low and rasping, emerged from the darkness within. Daniel's grip tightened on his gun. Something was in there, and it was waiting for him. For a moment, Officer Daniel Mercer couldn't move. The weight of the little girl's stare, the sheer terror in her wide eyes, froze him in place. The closet door stood slightly open, the darkness within seeming deeper than it should be. The rasping noise, low, unnatural, grew louder, curling around him like unseen fingers. Something was inside. Daniel took a breath, steadying his grip on his gun. "Stay right there," he murmured to the girl, but she didn't respond. She only clutched the hem of her nightgown, her knuckles turning white. He turned back toward the closet. His own pulse sounded deafening in his ears as he stepped closer. The smell of decay thickened in the air, an awful stench like rotting meat left out in the sun. He reached out with his free hand and nudged the door open. The hinges let out a long, aching squeal. His flashlight beam cut into the darkness. The closet was empty. For a split second, relief flooded through him. But it was short-lived. Then he saw them. Deep, claw-like gouges ran down the inside walls of the closet, as if something had been trapped in there for a long, long time. The wooden boards were splintered, scratched raw. His flashlight followed the marks downward to the floor. That's when he noticed it. A small, filthy handprint smeared in something dark. Something wet. Blood. Daniel's throat tightened. He turned back toward the little girl. She hadn't moved, hadn't even blinked. "How long have you been here?" he asked. She hesitated, her tiny shoulders trembling. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "They don't like it when I talk." The air in the room shifted. Daniel's instincts screamed at him. Something was wrong. The temperature had plummeted, his breath now visible in the dim glow of the streetlight filtering through the window. Then, behind him, the closet door slammed shut. The force of it nearly sent him stumbling. Whipping around, he raised his gun, his flashlight shaking slightly in his grip. The door rattled violently, as if something inside was clawing to get out. A guttural, inhuman voice rasped through the wood. "You shouldn't have come." Daniel's blood turned to ice. The little girl let out a small, choked sob, stepping backward toward the wall. And then, silence. The rattling stopped. Daniel stood frozen, his weapon aimed, waiting for whatever came next. His mind raced. Was this a home invasion? A hostage situation? Or something far, far worse? The closet door creaked open on its own. Empty. Just the gouges. The handprint. The unbearable, suffocating silence. Then he felt it, a breath on the back of his neck. Cold. Wrung. His entire body locked up. Slowly, heart hammering, he turned his head. The mirror above the dresser reflected the room behind him. The little girl, the closet, and something else. Something tall, twisted, grinning. Its hollow, sunken eyes locked onto his through the reflection, its mouth curling into a jagged, too wide smile. And then it lunged. The thing in the mirror moved fast, too fast. Before Daniel could react, the room plunged into chaos. The air turned heavy, suffocating, as a force slammed into him from behind, sending him crashing to the floor. His gun skidded across the wooden boards, his flashlight rolling to a stop near the closet. The beam flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows across the room. Pain shot through his ribs, but he had no time to recover. The girl let out a blood-curdling scream. Daniel pushed himself up just in time to see her being dragged toward the darkness of the closet. Thin, clawed fingers wrapped around her ankle. "No!" Daniel lunged forward, grabbing her arm. Her small fingers clung to his wrist, her terrified eyes locking onto his. The unseen force yanked her harder, and Daniel felt himself being pulled toward the black maw of the closet with her. His boots scraped against the wooden floor as he fought against the thing's unnatural strength. The girl sobbed, her voice breaking. "Please, don't let them take me." Daniel gritted his teeth, every muscle in his body straining. With one final heave, he yanked her free. The unseen force released her so suddenly that they both tumbled backward. The girl clutched onto him, her small body trembling against his chest. And then the closet door slammed shut. A deep, guttural growl reverberated from within. The air in the room shifted again. The suffocating cold dissipated, replaced by an eerie stillness. The flickering flashlight settled, its beam illuminating the closet door. Silence. Daniel's heartbeat thundered in his ears. He kept his arms protectively around the girl as he slowly reached for his gun. He aimed it at the closet, his hands still shaking. Nothing moved. No sound. It was like whatever had been there was gone. But he didn't trust it. He turned his attention to the girl, keeping his voice low but firm. "What the hell was that?" She sniffled, wiping her face with her sleeve. "They live in the dark places," she whispered. "In the walls. In the floor. They took Mommy and Daddy. Daniel felt a deep chill settle in his bones. Took them where? She swallowed hard. Inside, a loud bang rattled the walls. Daniel twisted toward the door. The sound hadn't come from the closet. It had come from downstairs. Someone or something was moving below them. Heavy footsteps dragging across the wooden floor. Slow, deliberate, not human. Daniel gripped his gun tighter. He didn't know what he was dealing with, but he had one job: to get the girl out of here. He scooped her up into his arms. "Hold on to me, okay?" She nodded, burying her face against his shoulder. Step by step, he made his way down the dark hallway, his gun raised. The house was different now. The air felt wrong, like he was walking through a space that no longer belonged to the world he knew. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls, moving when they shouldn't. The house breathed, a deep, slow inhale, a long, raspy exhale. Something was waiting for them. Something was watching. Daniel reached the stairs and aimed his flashlight downward. His breath caught in his throat. A figure stood at the bottom of the steps. Tall, unnaturally tall. Its limbs were elongated, joints bending at wrong angles. Its face wasn't a face at all, just a hollow, gaping void where eyes and a mouth should be. It didn't move. It only stared. Then, in a voice that didn't belong to this world, it spoke. "She belongs to us?" The girl screamed, and the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the house whole. Daniel's breath came in short, sharp bursts. The little girl trembled in his arms, her tiny hands clutching his uniform. The oppressive silence that followed the voice at the bottom of the stairs was worse than any sound. He couldn't see it anymore, but he knew it was still there. He reached for his radio, his fingers fumbling against his belt. "This is Officer Mercer." His voice was a whisper, desperate. "I need immediate backup at..." Static. Just static. A slow, clicking sound broke the silence. A wet, inhuman clicking coming from the base of the stairs. The thing was moving, shifting its limbs in grotesque angles. The girl whimpered against him. Daniel had to move. Now! He turned and sprinted down the hallway, feeling the floor bend beneath his boots as if the house itself was breathing. Shadows coiled along the walls, stretching toward him like eager hands. The front door, his only way out, was just ahead. He reached it, his gun still clutched in his free hand. Kicking the old wooden door open, he bolted outside, the cold night air hitting him like a shockwave. Relief, but only for a second, because the house didn't let them go. The moment his foot hit the ground, the world shifted. The neighborhood, the street, even his squad car gone. He turned on his heel, and his stomach dropped. The house was still there, but the rest of the world vanished. The sky above was an endless black void. No stars, no moon, no streetlights, just nothingness. His own breathing echoed back at him, as if the air had thickened, trapping every sound. What the hell?" he muttered. The girl pulled at his sleeve, her voice barely audible. "There's no outside. There never was." Daniel's mind reeled. He turned back to the house, and dread pooled in his gut. The front door, which he had just kicked open, was now closed again. And standing in the doorway was the thing. Its elongated frame barely fit in the entryway. Its head bent at an unnatural angle to keep from scraping the ceiling. The gaping void where its face should be twitched as if trying to form an expression. Then it spoke again, this time in a distorted, broken chorus of voices. "Why do you run?" Daniel raised his gun. His voice was steadier than he felt. "Stay back." The thing stepped forward, dragging one long, disjointed limb across the doorframe. "This is her home," it rasped. "She belongs here." Daniel glanced down at the girl. She was shaking, her eyes glistening with fear, but she wasn't crying anymore. She was remembering. "Do you know what it is?" he asked, keeping his gun trained on the thing. She swallowed hard. "They took Mommy and Daddy. I think they became part of it." Daniel clenched his jaw. His training had prepared him for many things, but not this. "Is there another way out?" The girl hesitated. Then, her gaze flicked toward the backyard. "The basement," she whispered. "There's a door that leads under the house." Daniel had no better options. Keeping his gun aimed at the thing, he slowly backed away, moving toward the side of the house. The creature didn't follow. Not yet. Instead, it tilted its head and smiled. Not with a mouth, not with lips, with the deep, shifting void of its face. "We'll find you," it promised. And then it vanished. A deep, suffocating silence filled the space where it had been. Daniel didn't wait to see if it would return. Clutching the girl's hand, he ran. The backyard was just as unsettling as the house. The grass was dry and brittle, the trees twisted at unnatural angles. But the most disturbing thing was the silence. Not even the rustling of leaves or the sound of their own footsteps. The girl led him toward a door set into the ground, partially hidden beneath overgrown weeds. Daniel grabbed the handle and pulled. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, narrow staircase leading downward. The air that seeped out was damp, stale, and wrong. A graveyard scent. The girl hesitated. "They don't like the basement." Daniel turned to her. "That's good, right?" She didn't answer. Steeling himself, he aimed his flashlight into the abyss and stepped inside, pulling the girl close. As they descended, the wooden steps creaked beneath their weight. The darkness clung to them, the air becoming thicker with each step. Then, his flashlight beam landed on something at the bottom of the stairs. A door, but not just any door. This one was different. It was old, far older than the rest of the house. The wood was blackened, warped by time. Strange, unfamiliar symbols were carved into the frame, deep and deliberate. A rusted chain stretched across it, keeping it sealed. And then the whispering began, soft at first, indistinct, then clearer. Dozens of voices, begging, pleading. Daniel's hand shook as he reached for the chain. He didn't know what was behind this door, but whatever it was their only way out, and it was waiting for them. The whispers seeped from the cracks in the old door, curling around Daniel like unseen fingers. He swallowed hard, feeling the sweat bead along his brow. The girl clung to his sleeve, her breath ragged and uneven. "They're behind that door," she whispered. Daniel didn't ask who. He already knew. He reached for the rusted chain, his fingers hesitating. It was old, corroded, but something about it felt unnatural, like it wasn't just metal holding the door shut, like it was a barrier. He pulled. The chain rattled, resisting at first, but then snapped free with a sickening crack. The whispering stopped. Silence. A silence so deep it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. Daniel reached for the doorknob, his gun still gripped tightly in his other hand. The girl whimpered, shaking her head. "Please don't." But they had no choice. He twisted the knob, and the door opened. The stench of decay hit him first. A wave of thick, rancid air, the scent of rot and damp earth. His flashlight struggled against the darkness, barely illuminating the space beyond. It wasn't just a basement. It was a tunnel, carved from solid rock. Its walls were covered in the same eerie symbols etched into the door. The floor was uneven, scattered with bits of broken wood, old bones, and something else, claw marks. Deep, desperate grooves torn into the stone. Daniel took a cautious step forward. The girl wouldn't move. "This is where they went," she whispered, tears glistening in her wide eyes. "Mommy and Daddy. I heard them scream down here. And then they stopped." Daniel's grip on his gun tightened. He scanned the tunnel, his pulse hammering. "Then we get out, find another way." But before he could turn back, the ground lurched beneath them. The entire house shuddered, a deep groaning sound rising from below, like something waking up. And then they came. Shadows poured from the walls, twisting, writhing, forming into shapes, human shapes. They moved wrong, their limbs contorted, their faces frozen in silent screams. Their eyes were hollow pits, mouths stretched too wide, as if frozen in endless agony. Daniel fired. The gunshot echoed violently in the tunnel, but the shadowed figures didn't flinch. The bullet passed straight through, swallowed by the darkness. The figures didn't attack. They just watched. A whisper filled the space. Not from the figures, but from the walls themselves. "You shouldn't have come." Then something huge moved in the tunnel. A presence. A force so immense it made Daniel's stomach drop. The darkness thickened, shifted, forming into something ancient and formless, its shape twisting as if reality itself struggled to contain it. A deep, inhuman voice rumbled from within the void. "She is ours." Daniel ran, scooping the girl into his arms. He turned and sprinted back toward the basement stairs. The walls shook, the tunnel behind them collapsing, the air filled with a deafening roar. The girl screamed, her small fingers digging into his shoulder. "Don't let them take me!" Daniel burst through the basement door, slamming it shut behind him. He didn't stop. He ran for the front door, the house twisting around him, the shadows crawling along the walls. He could hear it chasing them, the heavy, thundering footsteps, the deep, rattling breath. Daniel reached the front door and grabbed the knob locked. No, not locked. Gone. The door was gone. The house had sealed itself. "No, no, no." The little girl sobbed. "They don't let people leave." Daniel spun around, his flashlight flickering. The shadows were closing in, the thing from the tunnel rising, its form stretching across the walls, the ceiling, the entire house. "She belongs here." Daniel clenched his jaw. Not anymore. With a surge of desperation, he turned, kicked at the nearest window, glass shattered, cold air rushing in. Without thinking, he jumped, the girl held tightly in his arms. They hit the ground hard. Daniel rolled, shielding her as the impact knocked the air from his lungs. He gasped, looking up. The house was gone. Not destroyed, not abandoned, just gone. Nothing remained, not even the foundation. Just an empty lot, overgrown with weeds. The street was normal again. His squad car was there. The world was normal, like the house had never existed. Daniel turned to the girl. She was shaking but alive. He reached for his radio. "This is Officer Mercer." He paused. What could he even say? "I have a child in need of protection." Static. Then, "Copy that, Officer Mercer. What's your location?" Daniel exhaled. "Sending coordinates now." The little girl looked up at him. Her eyes, still red with tears, held a question. "What happens now?" Daniel stared at the empty lot. "I don't know," he admitted. But deep inside, he felt it wasn't over. Not yet. Somewhere beneath the earth, it was still waiting.